All right, today we're going to dive into a scenario that is, well, it's pretty chilling, but also totally plausible. We're talking about a major war in the Middle East, hypothetically set in 2026. We're going to unpack how a conflict like this could ignite and how its shockwaves could ripple out across the entire globe. Let's get into it. So, every war has a beginning, right? A date that gets etched into history. For this one, it's February 28th, 2026. And this isn't just some random date. It's the moment when years of simmering tension finally and violently boil over.
And the opening salvo, wow, the scale is just massive. In just the first 12 hours of the conflict, the United States and Israel launched 900 separate air and missile strikes against Iran. 900. That is an absolutely overwhelming show of force designed to land a knockout blow right from the start.
Now, these weren't just random shots in the dark. No way. These strikes were surgical. They were aimed right at Iran's military nerve centers, its command and control, its missile bases, and critically, its leadership. And then, the report that changes everything drops. Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, has been killed. An event like that is like pouring jet fuel on an open flame.
You can bet Iran's response was swift, and it was ferocious. They unleash their own waves of missiles and drones, and they don't just hit military sites. They target U.S. bases, embassies, and then they go for the jugular. They hit the world right where it hurts, the oil infrastructure humming through the Persian Gulf.
So, as you can imagine, a fight like this doesn't stay in one place for long. That first exchange of fire isn't the end of it, it's the spark. The spark that ignites a full-blown regional war, pulling in country after country and proxy after proxy across the Middle East.
Okay, so this really breaks down who's who in this expanding mess. You've got the main players, of course, the US, Israel, and Iran. But look how quickly it spreads. Iran's powerful proxy, Hezbollah, immediately opens a new front against Israel from Lebanon. And at the same time, huge energy producers like Saudi Arabia and the UAE are dragged right into the line of fire as their critical infrastructure becomes a prime target. So you can see how this thing is just blowing up across a bunch of really sensitive spots. Each one of these is its own tinderbox, ready to explode. You have the Strait of Hormuz, which is basically the world's oil superhighway. The Lebanon-Israel border, a historic and violent front, just erupts. And of course, U.S. bases in Iraq and Syria become magnets for attacks, turning those countries into battlegrounds. And this is why a conflict over there is never just their problem. It sends an immediate shockwave right through the global economy. This is the moment the battlefield connects directly to financial markets. And yeah, that means it hits your wallet, at the gas pump and at the grocery store.
And it really all boils down to one critical number: 20%. 1/5 of the entire world's oil supply flows through that narrow waterway, the Strait of Hormuz. So when that choke point suddenly becomes a war zone, you better believe the entire global economy just stops and holds its breath.
And you can see the impact almost instantly. It's crazy. Before the conflict, 1 minute oil is kind of stable, around $70 a barrel. The next, bam! With tankers under attack, the price skyrockets past $100. And that isn't just a number on a screen, that is a direct hit to the global economy.
And it's not just one pipeline or one tanker. The damage is everywhere. You're seeing disruptions at Qatar's massive natural gas facilities, Saudi refineries getting hit, oil terminals in the UAE under threat, and Iraqi exports grinding to a halt. It's a systematic attack on the world's entire energy supply chain. Of course, the financial markets react just as fast. We go from a world of stable, predictable growth to just chaos, extreme volatility. Panicked investors are yanking their money out of the stock market, scrambling for anything that feels safe, like gold. The fear isn't just about paying more for gas, it's about the real risk of runaway inflation and a full-blown global recession. But look, past all the numbers and the military strategy, there's the human cost, and it's devastating. This is the reality for millions of ordinary people who were just caught in the middle of a war they never asked for, their lives completely shattered. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of people forced from their homes in a terrifyingly short amount of time. This isn't a slow trickle. It is a massive, sudden wave of human displacement that creates an immediate and overwhelming humanitarian crisis.
This kind of crisis, it has so many different faces. You've got thousands killed or injured in the fighting. You have those hundreds of thousands who've lost their homes. Essential things we all rely on, airports, schools, hospitals, are just rubble. And for so many, life just stops.
International travelers are stranded as borders slam shut and the skies become no-fly zones. So this whole mess brings the world to a terrifying crossroads. Experts looking at this scenario basically see it going one of three ways from here. Three distinct paths, each one with wildly different consequences for all of us.
So what happens next? Well, it seems to boil down to one of three paths. The first is a short, contained war. The second, a long, grinding regional conflict. And the third, a truly catastrophic global crisis. Which path the world goes down depends on diplomacy, military success, and maybe just a bit of luck.
Path 1. This is the best-case scenario, if you can even call it that, a short war. The idea here is that intense international pressure somehow manages to force a ceasefire after just a few weeks. The damage is still huge, but the world pulls back from the brink of a wider catastrophe. It's the hopeful outcome, but let's be real, it's a tough one to pull off once the missiles start flying.
Then you have Path 2, which is much, much grimmer. A prolonged conflict. In this future, the war doesn't end. It just becomes this long, ugly, grinding war of attrition, with endless missile strikes and proxy battles that destabilize the entire Middle East for years, maybe even decades.
And then there's Path 3, a full-blown global crisis. This is the absolute worst-case scenario. The conflict spirals completely out of control, the oil shock triggers a deep global recession, and as the fighting gets worse, other major powers like Russia or China could get drawn in. And suddenly, you're looking at the terrifying possibility of a direct clash between world powers.
So, all of this, it leaves us with a huge question, doesn't it? Now, this scenario is just a projection, but it's built on very real-world tensions. It really forces you to ask, when geopolitics get this heated, this close to the boiling point, how do we actually stop a regional spark from becoming a global fire? And maybe more importantly, are the tools we have to stop it, diplomacy, are they strong enough to work when we need them most?